Good evening. Tonight, we're not stepping into a haunted house or a dark forest. We're stepping into a place that shouldn't exist. A town that once lived, breathed, and died, but never left. Get comfortable. This is the story of the town that forgot itself. There are stories that travel by word of mouth, and there are stories that settle into the bones of a place. Edivane is one of those stories. It's the kind of myth that passes from truck stop to diner counter, told the way people tell weather. With certainty, with a shrug, and with that tiny edge of something that makes you look over your shoulder. To some, it's a ghost story. To others, a warning. To a few, an irresistible lure. The first time Daniel heard of Edivane, he thought it was a joke. A local urban legend spun to frighten outsiders and to keep curious kids from wandering into the woods. Daniel was a freelance documentarian. He chased mysteries that lived on the fringe. Abandoned amusement parks, sunken hotels, odd traditions that refused to die. His work was about proving or debunking, about finding the grain of truth in rumor. He wasn't superstitious. He believed in evidence. So when an anonymous email slid into his inbox with the subject line, "Edivane will open again soon. Come before the mist closes," he saw it as an opportunity. Inside the message, a set of GPS coordinates and a single line, "You won't find it on any map. Be ready." The coordinates pointed to an empty stretch of forest road in northern Maine, miles from the nearest town and miles from any cell signal. Daniel packed the essentials: a camera with fresh batteries, a flashlight, a notebook, and too much coffee. He drove until the GPS squinted into incomprehension, until the paved road began to look less like a road and more like a suggestion. At the end of the path, the road simply stopped. There was a dirt pull-off, a barrier of thick trees, and then fog, dense and low, clinging to the ground like breath. Daniel's phone started to glitch, the GPS marker flicking between coordinates that meant nothing and nothing at all. He should have turned back. He didn't. He walked into the fog. At first, the lights he saw through the haze looked like car headlights, distant and unmoving. But they weren't. They were street lamps. Their bulbs burned steady, casting pools of amber that cut through the gray. The fog thinned just enough for Daniel to notice the shapes lining the street. Houses, a diner's neon sign dimmed to life, a church spire that reached up through the mist. A wooden sign, weathered but freshly painted letters, read, "Welcome to Edivane, established 1887. Everything was wrong and pristine. The clapboard houses were cleaned and waxed as if someone had been caring for them yesterday. The diner's window offered a glossy display of coffee cups and pie plates. A newspaper lay on the counter, its headline crisp, October 23, 1959. Doors gaped open. Chairs sat as though someone had just stood and stepped away. There wasn't a soul in sight. Daniel started filming. His voice came out steadier than he felt, a practiced cadence that reassured him even as the hair along his arms rose. The footage is deliberate. The main street, the post office, the church's bell tower. He moved from shop to shop, cataloging the arrested life of a town that shouldn't have any life left to arrest. Then, on camera, something moved. At first he thought it was a trick of light. But a figure stood by the bell tower, a man in a dark coat and hat, the outline of him unusual against the fog. Daniel swung around. No one. He checked the recording. The figure remained. It was watching him. Then the bell rang. The sound was metallic and deep, reverberating in a way that vibrated the camera in Daniel's hands. He checked his watch. 3:03 p.m. when he looked back up. The church doors were open. Inside, the temperature dropped. The scent of smoke threaded through the air, fleeting but distinct. Candles lined the pews, their flames steady despite the absence of anyone to tend them. Daniel whispered into his microphone, "This place feels alive." A voice answered him. Not from the bell tower, not from the street, but from everywhere and nowhere at once. Soft, intimate, like someone saying your name from the next room. "Welcome home," it said. He ran. He didn't rationalize. He burst back onto Main Street and everything had slipped. The sky had darkened as if someone had turned a dimmer. The lampposts flickered into a sequence of dying pulses. The fog thickened until it felt like walking through wool, and his car was gone. The road he'd driven in on had vanished like a tide pulling back. That's when the whispers started. At first, it was a rustling, like dry leaves. Then words braided themselves into the sound. Not shouting or direction, just a chorus, a rolling murmur that seemed to come from every shutter, every doorway, and every shadow. He swung his camera toward the sound. In the viewfinder, the main street filled with people, men in suits buttoned wrong, women in dresses cinched at the waist, children chasing one another between parked cars that belonged to a different era. They smiled, and their smiles were perfectly arranged, like faces in a photograph that had never been taken. But their eyes were wrong. Their irises were missing, replaced by a blank frost that made them look older than their faces. When the camera glitched, fragments of other faces blinked in. A woman from a 1930s portrait, a child from a wartime ration card, a youth in a leather jacket from the late 50s. The town seemed to flicker through eras, as if someone were flipping pages too fast. Daniel shouted into the air at the top of his lungs. "What do you want from me?" The whispers gathered into a single phrase, to be remembered. That line, so simple and human, anchored the horror in a way nothing else could. They didn't want to hurt him. They wanted recognition. They wanted to exist beyond the fog and the forgetting. When he tried to run, Edivane didn't let him. The streets looped, signs repeating like echoes. Main Street, Elm Street, Market Street, Main Street again. Houses rearranged themselves. What had been a straight walk turned into a labyrinth that tightened like a fist. Daniel's camera hit the pavement. When he bent to grab it, the lens showed something else. The same street, with windows full of faces pressed to glass, watching. Each person smiled the same way, each pair of eyes blank as winter. He ran toward the church, toward the bell, as if the sound itself might be an altar or a key. The ringing grew faster with each step until it resembled a heartbeat. He climbed the narrow spiral of the tower, hands slipping on old wood, breath fogging in the chill. At the top, fog stretched to the horizon, a silver sea with no shore. Below him, figures gathered, looking upward. He thought he saw familiar faces among them. Neighbors from his childhood street, faces of people he never knew but recognized with the strange certainty dreams offer. And then, impossibly, his own face among them, not just one Daniel, but multiple Daniels of different ages, frozen in time, candid and posed and simultaneously not a lot. The bell stopped. The silence that slammed into the town after that stop was so complete it felt like falling into a well. In that absence of sound, everything blinked out, the lamplight, the windows, the faces, and the fog closed like a lid. When the world came back, Daniel was gone. 2 weeks later, a trail crew working near a remote forest road found a camera lying in mud. It was half buried, rain dulled, but the memory card was intact. The footage showed hours of fog, static, and small movements. The last usable clip was the most troubling. Daniel standing in the middle of Edivane's main street, smiling the way someone smiles at a reunion. Behind him, figures leaned from windows and waved, frozen mid-gesture, like a paused film where everyone has the same fixed expression. At one angle, the welcome sign had changed. Someone, or something, had scrawled an additional line beneath the town's founding date. It read, in looping script as if someone had tattooed it into wood, remembered by Daniel. Authorities tried to trace the coordinates embedded in the footage's metadata. The GPS tags led them back to the forest road where Daniel had disappeared. But when they combed the terrain, they found nothing. No foundation stones, no overgrown path. The area was an unbroken stand of trees and bog. Edivane did not appear on any map. There were no municipal records, no census entries, no nothing. It was as if the town had been shaved off history. Rumors spread, as they always do. Some people insisted Daniel had staged the whole thing for clicks and notoriety. Others said he'd simply walked into a pocket of groundwater and gotten lost. A few whispered the thing the hikers refused to say aloud, that the town was alive in some other way, sustained by memory, and that Daniel had asked it to remember him. That last idea, that a place might be kept between breaths by the act of remembering, sits at the heart of Edivane. We like to think places are permanent. We mark them on maps, we pin them to phones, we take photographs as proof. But memory is fragile. Communities fade, stories slip. When a place is forgotten, when all the people who knew it are gone, what happens to the shape of its streets? To the sound of its bell? Does the place sleep, or does it become something else? Hunched and waiting for attention. Edivane answers with a riddle wrapped in fog. It lives in an in-between. Part town, part mirror, part repository of faces. It invites visitors not to document it but to remember it. The rules, if there are rules, are not written in law. They're written in practice, in the small rituals of recognition. Someone, perhaps every person who ever loved or mourned the place, left a trace. Kissed paint on a porch rail, a note tucked behind a loose brick, a name carved lightly on a bench. The town collects those acts like currency. It exchanges memory for presence. The chilling thing about that bargain is how easy it is to consent. We remember with photos and stories. We bookmark places in playlists and in late-night conversations. To remember is to carry into burden. Edivane speaks to that human tendency, the need to hold on to what's slipping away. Its invitation is sweet. Come, remember us. Stay a while. Tell our names. The cost is absence. The lesson, if you want to call it that, isn't purely supernatural. It's a reflection. Look at abandoned buildings in every small town and you'll see evidence of memories waiting. A swing with a single rusted chain. School lockers carved with decades of initials. Names on a war memorial. Each is an attempt to resist erasure. Edivane is a dramatization of that resistance. A town literally maintained by remembrance, eager and hungry for minds to hold it. And there's a darker interpretation. What if Edivane isn't a passive repository but a predator of sorts? What if it lures people who seek it because those people bring their own histories, their own catalog of names, and the town consumes those names to keep itself whole? That's where Daniel's choice becomes crucial. As a documentarian, he arrived intending to extract truth. The town, if it could be said to have intention, wanted to be seen in a different way. Not as proof but as legacy. To be remembered is not the same as to be recorded. Records could be archived. Memories inhabit living minds. To be remembered is to be alive again, however briefly. Which brings us to the final image, the welcome sign. If you ever find a place like this, a town that seems misplaced, a neighborhood that has slid between calendars, look at its sign. Notice what names live there. They may be yours. They may be someone else's. They may have been written by water or by hand. They will be an invitation or an indictment. There are practical tips you can take from the story without believing in spectral doorbells. When you enter unknown places that tug at your curiosity, especially remote or abandoned ones, take safety seriously. Tell someone where you're going. Keep a reliable vehicle. Bring a charged phone, redundant batteries, and a plan for unexpected weather. Curiosity is not a crime, but it's better to carry a map than to rely on a foggy sense of wonder. But also, and this is the softer edge of the warning, be mindful of what you carry with you when you wander. Memories have power. The stories you tell about a place can give it new life or bury it further. When you share a tale, you add a thread to a larger tapestry that will be read by others. If you find yourself wanting to prove the existence of something uncanny, ask yourself what proving it will do. Will your evidence comfort or condemn? Will it preserve or corral? Edivane, in the end, is more than a ghost story. It's a metaphor for the fragile places in our lives that survive only in recollection. It's about the human compulsion to mark, to memorialize, and the ways that compulsion can both save and consume. It's about the voices that get louder when we try to forget, and the static that fills the space where names have been wiped clean. If you ever find a town that's not on a map, the safest thing might be to keep walking. Don't stop for the photo. Don't lean in for the perfect frame. If you must look, look with care. Say the names you remember out loud, softly, as an offering rather than a demand. Respect the boundary between fascination and intrusion. But if you're like Daniel, and you feel the tug of a place that insists on being seen, don't be surprised if it responds. Some invitations are less about hospitality and more about hunger. Edivane doesn't want to witness so much as a witness to remember it into being. At some point, our stories are all we have of the things we've lost. A photograph is a neat piece of proof, but a memory is messy and living. Take care of the memory. Keep the names. Say them often enough that they don't fade. Be the place's gentle protector, not its final betrayer. The camera found in the mud gives us only one thing for certain. Daniel's last recorded frame is calm. He looks like someone who has just come home after a long absence and is a little surprised to find people waiting. His smile is small, and behind him, the windows are full. The footage breaks on that image, as though someone closed the shutter. We don't know what happened to him after that. We can guess. We can tell each other stories on cold nights about the bell that rings at 3:03 and about the way fog can be a mouth. But maybe the most humane response is to honor both the man and the place by remembering them without owning them. To tell the story of Edivane is to let it keep existing in the shared space between listeners, not to drag it out into daylight and pin it like a specimen. Some things are kinder if we leave them a little mysterious. So tonight, If your curiosity nudges you toward the unknown, be brave and be careful. Hold the people and places you love in words and in photographs, but remember that sometimes remembering is an act of tenderness rather than conquest. Good night. And if you ever stumble across a town that's not on any map, don't stop to take pictures, because the next photo in your camera roll might not be yours. The synth lingers, then fades out into the sound of a distant bell ringing once, soft and unresolved.